Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. Please be seated. Sometimes it takes going through a great ordeal. Sometimes it takes going through something that's difficult, that's challenging, something thrown on you, something not expected, something expected, before you can turn around and look at it. Before you can, as Mary did this night, ponder it. It's like getting married. All of a sudden you're in love, you think you're going to get married, you get engaged, you make the plans, you go to the church, you go to the judge, then you go to the party, and then you end up on a honeymoon. But then you go home. You go home and you look on your left-hand ring finger and there's something there that hadn't been there before. Something is different. Something has changed, and it's time to figure out, wow, what does this now mean? Because it's not what it was before. Telling the stories of the ordeal, telling the stories of, well, Christmas past is a part of our Christmas life. One of the stories that I treasure, that I love, that I ponder every year was written in 1843 by Charles Dickens. A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol starts with this loud bang, and the nephew of Mr. Scrooge walks in and says, "Merry Christmas, Uncle." And he says, "Humbug! You keep Christmas in your way, I'll keep Christmas in mine. Good day with you. Humbug!" Scrooge decides to say, "No, I'm not going to ponder. I'm not going to think. I'm going to stop this story here." But with the second ghost, the ghost of Christmas present, they end up in the house. They end up in the house of Bob Cratchit, his clerk. And there's this little bench. You may have seen it in a movie or seen it in the book. There's a little bench right next to the hearth with a little bitty crutch. And sitting on that little bitty stool next to the little bitty crutch is a little boy. And as the ghost of Christmas present and Scrooge start to leave, he turns and he looks and he says, "Will Tiny Tim live?" Mary was sitting there that night with a little baby in a manger. She's cold, maybe. She's amidst all the animals, the sounds, the movements, and not a place you would think to have a baby, but she's there. She was thinking, as I suspect most mothers do when they first look at their first child, what do I do? What's here? Why? But I suspect those questions were a little different on that night, because shepherds came running into town. Mothers, how many shepherds came running into town? I don't see any hands. No, Jan? No, Jan didn't have any shepherds running. No. So what was she thinking? What was she pondering? What was sitting there? Was it the shepherds? Was it the journey from Nazareth all the way down to Bethlehem? Or was it maybe the story of those angels? Glory to God in the highest heaven. Peace peace? We live in a time of war. Goodwill? We don't live in a time of goodwill. There's enmity in the streets. And the pondering continues. A friend of mine and I were talking not long ago about a favorite subject of most of ours, and that is change. Change. And she looked at me and said, "I'm all for change. You start." Whoever wants to change, really, at the end of the day? Change is never easy, it's never fun, and nor do we often choose it. There's an author, her name is Joan Chittister. She's a nun and an author and a spiritual director, and she wrote a book called Two Dogs and a Parrot. And in it, she's doing little vignettes. They're wonderful little stories of life. And while she's a spiritual director, it's kind of like a therapist or a counselor, but for birthing the Spirit in people's lives. And she said people come to her because they want change. They want something new. They want to figure something out, like with a therapist. But what they actually come for is comfort. They come to just feel good and not always to change. I wonder about those shepherds. They were the first ones told, not Mary. Those shepherds were way out in the field. They were minding their own business. They were just sitting there, and all of a sudden, angels came, and they sang a song, the bells rung. Who knows what else happened, and they fell to the ground. They got all scared. They listened and listened and listened, and finally they got up and they said, "My gosh, could this be?" There was a glimmer of hope. They started to ponder. They started to think. They started to put together an idea that maybe this is true. Well, maybe. So they ran down the hill. It said they went with haste. That's a nice way of saying they did a sprint. And they got down there, and they got to the manger, and they told the story. But that's where it ends. Those shepherds went back to their flocks. They went back to their fields, back with their staffs and the sheep in the darkness of that night. But Mary didn't stop. She may have wondered, why tonight? Why, in the midst of this night, in this life, in this day, at this time, why now? For she treasured all those stories. She treasured what the shepherds had to say. She treasured everything that was told about the angels and about God. But for Mary, she had to think about tomorrow. Because tomorrow was about to come, and the baby had to be fed, and the baby had to be watered, and the baby had to live. Mary couldn't just stay pondering. Mary had to take and make a bridge. For she is the only one that starts in this story and that goes through the story of Jesus. No other figure of the Bible goes as long as she does in the story of Jesus. She sees the ministry of walking to and fro on the dusty road. She hears the words that he says. She hears of the blind getting their sight and the deaf hearing. She hears and sees the dead being raised. But guess what? That pondering never stops. For she shows up. She arrives with this guy named Joseph of Arimathea. as they take her son's body down from the cross with oils and ointments and spices. This mother who pondered this amazing story so many years ago, built builds the bridge from then to now. When Scrooge woke up on Christmas morning, having gone through the ordeal, the light looked different. Something had changed. When Scrooge woke up, there was sun. It wasn't the dear, dreary English countryside, no. It was a new day. It was a new way to see life. No, Scrooge was new. So he goes and he knocks on his nephew's door with hat in hand, saying, "Please, please forgive me. May I come? May I be you?" And he's welcomed in. The pondering took hold of him. But it's not his fruits that we see the most that night. There was a little boy who sat by the edge of the hearth with a little crutch. And that boy, Mr. Tiny Tim, sat on his shoulder and told the story of God bless you, everyone. Mary's pondering, and Scrooge pondered, and the pondering continues today. Amen.